The widow thought he was a thief, never knowing she was saving the man who owned the house. On a cold, wind-scraped evening when the sky hung low and gray over the lonely edge of the frontier town, Eliza more tightened her shawl and stepped onto the porch of the old house that had been her burden and refuge since her husband's death. A house that creaked like it remembered better days. A house she kept only because it was all she had left, and as she reached for the lantern she heard a sound. Soft, scraping, careful. Coming from the side of the barn. The kind of sound that made a widow's heart jump and her hand instinctively reach for the iron poker she kept by the door, because out here, alone, mercy could be a mistake. She moved slowly, lantern held high, and there in the half-light she saw him, a man crouched near the fence, his coat torn, his face shadowed by dirt and blood, one hand pressed hard against his side as if holding himself together, and when the lantern light caught him he froze like a cornered animal, eyes sharp with fear and defiance, and Eliza's first thought was simple and terrifying: thief. The town had warned her often enough, men drifting through, stealing livestock, taking advantage of women alone, and grief had not made her foolish, so she raised the poker and demanded he leave, her voice stronger than she felt. But the man did not rush her, did not threaten or beg, he only swayed, his knees buckling, and he would have fallen if the fence had not caught him, and something in that moment cracked the hard shell Eliza had built around her heart, because thieves did not usually look like they were dying on their feet, and before she could stop herself she stepped closer, close enough to see the wound beneath his coat, dark and wet, close enough to see the pain etched into his jaw as he tried not to groan. She told herself she would regret this, but she lowered the poker and told him to come inside, warning him that if he tried anything foolish she would not hesitate, and he nodded once, grateful but proud, and leaned on her just enough to make it to the house. Inside, by the weak glow of the fire, she sat him down and cut away the ruined fabric, discovering a bullet wound that had been badly tended and reopened, and as she cleaned it with shaking hands he finally spoke, his voice rough, thanking her, apologizing for frightening her, saying he had no intention of stealing, that he only needed shelter for the night, and Eliza did not answer because words felt dangerous, because caring felt dangerous, and yet she worked carefully, efficiently, as if saving a stranger were no different from mending a fence. He slept by the fire that night, fevered and restless, and Eliza sat in the chair with the poker across her lap until dawn, watching him, wondering who he was and why he carried himself like a man used to giving orders even while bleeding, wondering why he looked at the house not with curiosity but with something like familiarity. Over the next days she fed him broth, changed his bandages, listened as he spoke in pieces of a life that sounded too large for a wandering thief. Business dealings, land disputes, plans interrupted by betrayal, and still she assumed he exaggerated, because lonely men often did, and she had learned the hard way not to believe promises too easily. The town noticed smoke in her chimney again and whispered, some with concern, some with suspicion, but Eliza did not care, because something had shifted inside her, something quiet and brave, the part of her that had survived loss and knew that kindness was not weakness. When the man finally stood without swaying and thanked her properly, offering payment she refused, he smiled, a small genuine thing, and said he owed her his life, and for reasons she did not understand that mattered to her more than gold. It was only a week later, when the town's sheriff rode up with two well-dressed men and asked Eliza if she had seen a stranger matching a description, that the truth unraveled, because the description was painfully clear, and when she pointed toward the house the men stepped forward with relief and respect, calling the stranger by name, calling him the rightful owner of the very land Eliza believed she rented from a distant, uncaring estate, explaining that he had been ambushed while returning to reclaim his property from corrupt hands, that the house, the barn, the fields, all of it, belonged to him. Eliza stood frozen, heat rising to her face as shame and fear tangled in her chest, because she had threatened him, suspected him, nearly turned him away, and yet when he came to the door, walking steadily now, there was no anger in his eyes, only something softer, something that looked a lot like gratitude and admiration. He dismissed the men gently and asked to speak with Eliza alone, and there on the porch where she had first raised the poker, he told her the truth, that he had known the house was his the moment he saw it, that he had recognized details no thief would notice, that he had stayed silent because he wanted to see who she was without power or titles in the way, and what he had seen, he said, was a woman of courage, of compassion, a woman who saved a wounded man when it would have been easier and safer to turn him away. Eliza expected eviction, expected to lose everything again, but instead he told her she could stay, that the house would always be hers if she wished, because land meant nothing without people who cared for it, and because debts of the heart mattered more than contracts. As days turned into weeks, the house felt different, warmer, alive in a way it had not since her husband's laughter once filled it, and Eliza realized that by seeing a thief instead of an owner. She had seen the man more clearly than anyone else ever had, and by saving his life she had unknowingly changed her own, not with romance promised too quickly or endings tied in neat bows, but with something steadier, respect, trust, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the greatest turns in our lives begin with fear, followed by a single brave choice. And if this story moved you, if you believe that kindness can rewrite destiny and that strength often wears the face of mercy, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more powerful, emotional stories like this are waiting for you. Stories that remind us that even in the hardest moments, one act of compassion can change everything.